let's now talk through the teaching points of using a rowing machine for your clients. This video is something that I want you to pay extra attention to. Going into the gym industry, you're going to use a rowing machine a lot. It's one of the standard pieces of equipment in pretty much any gym you're going to go to, whether it's a global gym or an independent gym or anything like that as well. So let's go through the technique, how you can use it. At the end of this video, we'll have a little bit of a snippet about how you can use the head unit of the rower to program different sessions as well. Let's first of all, they talk about getting set up to use the rowing machine for your clients. And we're going to run through each stage that you need to make sure is in place for your clients as well. The first thing to make sure is in place is the bar. Okay, now the bar needs to be in the cradle here. If you leave it at its end point there, which can sometimes happen in busy gyms, if you or your client get strapped in, but you haven't got the bar here, once you're strapped in, you're going to find yourself trying to shuffle forward to grab that bar. So as a good little rule of thumb, always make sure this bar is in the cradle to start with. Once you're happy with that, the next thing is to check the resistance level here. 10 being the hardest pull that you're going to have. 1 being the lightest pull that you're going to have. It's to stimulate the drag. The more airflow going through, the harder it's going to be. Okay, so again, we'll reference this. There's a bit more information about this in your manuals. You're generally going to want it around the 4 to 6 mark. If someone's a big, heavy individual, 80, 90, 100 kilos, they might be a little bit higher up this chart onto the 10 because you have to factor in body weight for this pull as well. But we'll reference this a bit more in the manual. Okay, but just make sure that is set where you want it to be for you or your client, because again, once you're strapped in here, if you need to change that, there's a long way, a big reach going forward to adjust this. So make sure bar is in the cradle and the resistance is set. Once you're happy with that, then you can get your feet into position. So you're going to work out for yourself and for your client how many holes need to be showing on this foot setup here. Okay, you can adjust these nice and easily. I know exactly where I want to be. Again, you'll do the same for your client. Once you've worked out what setting they're on, make a note on their program what setting they need to be on. You want the strap, and we'll show you this as well at the end of the video. You want your strap to be going across the middle of the foot, okay, not on your toes, because that's going to strain your ligaments. Also not too tight on the ankle either, but just across the top of your foot. You might also want to set up anything on the head unit on the console before you get strapped in as well, because again, for some people who are limited in flexibility, once they're strapped in, they're going to be stretching forward to try to make the adjustments needed. Okay, now with most rowing machines, you can just start rowing and the head unit will switch on, but we'll run through a little bit more at the end of this video about some of the setups that you can have. So let's get ourselves strapped in. You want these straps here nice and tight. They don't want to be loose on your foot. They're effectively going to hold your feet in place as you're rowing. If it's too loose, there is a chance of falling out and coming off your seat as well. So make sure they're always nice and tight. The effort for the rowing technique is coming really from the legs, through the core into the upper body. And you've got to make sure each of those elements are technically sound with every client you do. And this is what we're going to reference now. So let me just show the rowing action. Remember, with setting up anything, cardiovascular wise, we use the acronym of IDEA. Introduce, demonstrate, explain, and get active. So what I'm doing now really for you guys is giving you a demonstration here of what it looks like when you're actively rowing. I'll now go through the explanation as well. With the rowing action, it all stems around a good solid base, making sure the abs are engaged, making sure that the core is really strong. You don't want any individual rowing with a real arched, relaxed back. It's going to give them backache anyways, and it can lead to injury. So make sure, again, you work the core. You use that bracing to give a good strong posture here. The drive, this is your starting position here. The drive is coming from the legs, okay? So as you drive through those legs, extending this cable here, you're going to then pull with the arms. So it's going to always be push with the legs, pull with the arms, ideally into your lower abs. on this one here, let's look at the legs to start with. Remember, we're talking about joint alignment and posture all the time, aren't we? Okay, so make sure even on the push of a row machine that your client's knees aren't buckling in or they're not going too wide. They will only be in a nice straight line from ankle to knee to hip, okay? And then the posture is addressed on the back of that. Bum always firmly sat down into the seat. Try to push through the heels, not your toes, okay? That's going to keep your bum firmly down in the seat as well. If you ever have a client that's going to go really hard into some interval training all of a sudden and they push through the heels, it can push through their toes, it can sometimes lift their bum off the seat will go that way and they will go that way. So make sure that another good teaching point is always keep that bum pushed into the seat and drive through those heels to do that. So let's look at this technique in action then. So we drive with the legs through the heels, drive with the legs, pull into your lower abs with those elbows tucked in past your sides here, okay? Make sure chest is proud, abs are tight, shoulders pull back as well. And we can lean back a little bit, but not much, okay? Always keeping that back nice and straight. On the release, this bar keeps this cable in a straight line. We're not going over the knees or anything like that. We're not letting this flip around. It's a nice straight line with this cable from the abs back to that starting position, okay? So we drive, pull, and release. Now you guys have got to make sure your clients can do this first element of using a row before you do anything, okay? Before you start using this as a pulse raiser or doing any intervals or some high-end aerobic activity, make sure they got the technique. Driving with those legs, pulling with those arms into your lower abs, keeping that back straight, shoulders back, get that squeeze in the shoulder girdles as well. Drive and pull. Now notice when I come back in on the return, I'm not stopping here. I'm doing a very short pull. I'm going to give myself more drag and more pace effectively and a little bit more work by slightly leaning forwards, okay? My legs, I'm not letting my hips come all the way into my heels. They stay back slightly, but to get back to that starting position, I'm keeping my back straight and I'm leaning forwards ever so slightly. So with that in mind, we push, pull in with the abs, elbows tucked in. On the return, I lean forward slightly. Always keeping your back nice and straight as you do it. Remember, if you're going to get your client to do any interval training on here, you're going to need to show them what type of intensity you're expecting them to do if they're working on through high intense interval training. So therefore, I can demonstrate to my client, I want you to row at this level here, and I'll talk about the display in a second, if we're doing a pulse raiser. If we're doing some steady state cardio, we might have to pull and work a little bit harder. Always checking that back posture, always making sure they're driving with the legs, pulling with the arms, full range of movement. If we're going to do some interval training, I have to demonstrate the type of pace I want my client to work at for that interval training. For example, if we're going to do 20 or 30 seconds of fast activity, show them what that looks like. So you're always keeping the technique. You can see how the chain starts moving a bit more, but I'm not letting it flap around. You're keeping it nice and straight. No flapping, okay? That way you set your client up so they know exactly the type of intensity that they have to put into it. Once you've finished, return this back to the cradle. If your clients are going to be doing interval training on this, let's say, for example, 30 seconds fast, 30 seconds rest. During the rest period, bearing in mind, they're still going to be strapped into the stirrups here. Try to encourage active rest. You don't want them to just row really hard and then stop like this. You ideally want them to keep hold of the bar and give themselves a bit of active recovery. Keep moving nice and gently through the rest period of 30 seconds. There's no effort. I'm just keeping the muscles working and moving to flush out any lactic acid and to get rid of all the waste products in the muscles as well. Okay, so that's a rowing machine. So remember the teaching points. Good grip on the handles, thumbs around as always. Make sure things are in position and set up before you start. Good, strong, tight straps around the feet, across the top of the foot there. It's all about joint alignment and posture. Knees in line with the ankles, in line with the hips. Good posture here. We drive with the legs, pull with the arms. Sitting on nice and straight here. You can lean back a touch, but no more. Okay? Really engage the core. On the return, keeping this posture. We're never arching the back forwards or being lazy. We're going to keep this posture and just lean into it a little bit there without the hips going past this angle. So we're not going all the way in and hitting our heels. If you see a client hitting their heels, change it. You want them stopping about there and just leaning forward a little bit more. Obviously, some clients are going to be more mobile than others, so this is another thing you've got to take into consideration. But they're the basic teaching points for this one. Make sure you clearly go through these with your client, especially for the first few times of them using it, to make sure they understand what the teaching point should be. If you are getting to do any higher intense activity, make sure they got the technique down first before you start putting more intensity into the row itself. So that's the row. I'll go through now at the end of this video a little bit of an idea of the setup on this screen here so you can factor in a few things, and I'll describe the pace a little bit as well. So with any client, if you want just a workout, you can press just the row here, okay? Or you can just start rowing and it's all going to come on automatically. You can see on this screen here, it gives you your pace for every 500 meters. I'll explain that in a second, and your time and your strokes per minute. We can change the display. And on here, we've now got how many meters we've performed, again, your average pace here, projected meters as well. So if you want your client to achieve 200 meters, it will show you how quickly, how long it's going to take them to get there. Okay, so you've got lots of stats on this screen here that you can also use. You can change this display here by pressing the units. So we can look at the watt power output, okay? How much power are they putting into every single pull? We can even look at calories burned per hour, but we're not going to worry too much about giving your clients a calorie target per se. The one I use a lot the most is the pace for every 500 meters. For example, if I start rowing now, you'll see this change. If I row gradually at a nice slow point, this is nice and gentle, we can see that it will take me 3 minutes, roughly, around the 3 minute mark, to do 500 meters. If I go faster, that number's going to get lower. Because I'm pulling harder, it's now going to take me 2 minutes and 15 seconds-ish to do 500 meters. Now this is what I want you to use as a target for your clients. If you feel they could work a bit harder, and this is what's coming up on the screen, ask them to work harder by pushing with the legs harder, pulling a bit harder with the upper body, and this number here will go from 214 down to 205, maybe even below 2 minutes for every 500 meters. So it's a really good way to use this one here to encourage your clients, to motivate them, to give them a bit of a target. You can also see their strokes per minute. The more strokes you're doing every minute, obviously the higher that number's going to go. If I row again gently with good technique, at a gentle level, you can see I'm doing about 30 strokes per minute there. That's nice and gentle. I can go slower and do only between 25 to 30. If I was to row harder, not only is that going to go up, because I'm doing more strokes per minute, but I can pull harder as well. So this number here is also going to change. And you can see there as well, I got a meter target also. Just to give you a quick idea about how you can use this display here to set up some intervals, if I go into select workout, I can select my own workout by pressing new workout, and then here I can set a distance target. For example, I might want my client to do 1,000 meters, so I use the plus or the minus to change the relevant number down to 1,000. I can scroll across with the arrows, and then when I've got my distance, I can press the tick there, and then it's all set up. So now it's going to count down from 1,000 meters. Perfect for some clients. If I go back, I can also at this stage set up some interval training here for my client or for myself. I could choose to do distant 200-meter sprint, 30-second rest for example, or I can set it all to time, intervals time. If we were to do 30 seconds work, I make this 30 seconds by using my plus and my minus, scroll across, change that to the 3 to get your 30 seconds. Then I can set my rest as well by scrolling down, and I can select 30 seconds rest as well. Okay? When I press my tick, that's all set up, ready to go. Interval 1, as soon as I start rowing, starts counting down for 30 seconds. Once I get the 30 seconds, I rowed as hard as I possibly can. It's going to give me 30 seconds rest, and it's going to tell me how many meters I achieved. In the second interval I do, to give your client a bit of motivation, you might take that, let's say for example, 100 meters, 120 meters, and I'll say let's try and achieve more meters within this 30 seconds by looking at the projected finish. Okay, so you've got quite a few stats there that you can use. You don't want your client rowing really erratically, so you want to try and keep the strokes per minute at a nice constant level. If they're rowing hard at, let's say, 34 strokes per minute, if they start rowing really erratically, that number's probably going to go higher because they're probably going to be doing a shorter pull. That's not always the way to go faster. Keep the strokes per minute the same, just make sure they're driving with the legs and pulling with the arms a lot harder. So that's the rowing machine. So let's just recap those teaching points. So remember, in your position when you are rowing, it is so important to remember that joint alignment and posture. You can see with the driving element, the drive comes from the legs first, drive with those legs, and then pull those arms in, bringing the bar into your lower abs. Elbows stay close to your side. You almost want to squeeze those shoulder blades together a little bit at the back and keep that chest nice and proud as you do it. Keep the cable in a nice flat line. It may move around slightly, but you don't want it moving around erratically. Try to keep that cable in a nice smooth line on the pull from as far close to the rower as possible into those lower abs. Keep looking forwards at all times. You don't want to be looking around you. You want your head, your gaze going forwards. Ideally looking at the head unit of the console. Just really so that you keep an eye on your pace and the effort that you're putting in. You can see there as well, you want to be almost hitting that end unit of the rowing machine with that bar if your mobility allows you to stretch all the way forwards. Obviously, as you fatigue on the rowing machine, that's where your posture can be affected slightly. You may forget to pull those shoulders back to keep that chest proud. You may forget to reach forwards with a nice straight back. So with your clients especially, do make sure that you're constantly keeping that eye on their posture, on their technique. You're reinforcing that back to them, making sure they're driving with those legs, pushing through those heels, keeping the bum flat on the seat. And just make sure that your coaching position is always a good one. You're kind of almost crouching down towards the head unit of the rowing machine itself. Asking your client for feedback every now and then. You might want to stand up and do a 360 observation to check their posture, check their technique. But before you ask them to increase any more speed in the movement or anything like that, ask for feedback, use that RPE scale, and just make sure that you're happy that they can go a little bit faster or a little bit slower. Always remember to motivate and encourage.